entitled parents FIL wrote me out of will, so I exposed his secrets. I stared at the legal documents spread across my kitchen table, my hands trembling as I read the same devastating line for the 10th time. Sarah Mitchell is hereby removed as beneficiary from all provisions of this last will and testament. 2 weeks. It had been exactly 2 weeks since I'd told my father-in-law Frank that I wouldn't be quitting my job to stay home with the grandkids that didn't even exist yet. 2 weeks since he'd looked me dead in the eye and said, "A real woman knows her place in a family." The irony was suffocating. For 6 years, I'd been more of a daughter to Frank Mitchell than his own son ever was. When the cancer diagnosis came, who drove him to every chemo appointment? Me. Who researched experimental treatments and held his hand through the worst nights? Me. Who reorganized his entire financial portfolio when he was too sick to think straight? Also me. My husband Jake was conveniently too busy with work for most of it, which left me picking up the pieces of his father's life while building my own career as a financial advisor. Frank used to joke that I was the son he never had. Jake would just roll his eyes and say his dad had always been dramatic. But apparently, I was only worthy of being his daughter when I was useful. The lawyer had been apologetic when he'd called. "I'm sorry, Sarah." He insisted on the changes. Said something about wanting to keep the family assets within blood relatives who understood traditional values. Traditional values. The man who'd told me he loved me like his own daughter, who'd walked me down the aisle when my own father couldn't be bothered to show up, who'd promised me that I'd finally found the family I'd always dreamed of, that man had reduced me to a cautionary tale about women who didn't know their place. I'd sacrificed so much for the Mitchell family. Missed promotions because of Frank's medical emergencies. Turned down job opportunities in other cities because he needed stability during treatment. Used my own savings to cover his medical expenses when insurance fell short. And for what? To be erased like I never mattered at all. The worst part wasn't even the money, though losing out on what should have been a substantial inheritance stung. It was the message. After years of making me believe I belonged, Frank had made it crystal clear that I was disposable. A hired caretaker whose services were no longer required. But here's the thing about being a financial advisor, you learn to read between the lines of people's financial records. And Frank Mitchell had been very, very careless about where he thought I'd been looking during those long months of managing his affairs. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken months ago, bank statements, property records, receipts that painted a very interesting picture of Frank's traditional values. Evidence of things that would make his perfect reputation crumble faster than his old-fashioned ideals could hold it together. His 70th birthday party was this Saturday. The whole extended family would be there, including his wife of 45 years, his church friends, and all the relatives who were apparently more deserving of his love than I was. I'd spent 6 years being the perfect daughter-in-law, putting everyone else's needs before my own, swallowing my pride, and accepting scraps of affection like they were precious gifts. Frank Mitchell wanted to play games about who belonged in this family? Fine. Let's play. I spent the next 3 days in a fog, mechanically going through the motions of normal life while rage simmered just beneath the surface. Jake noticed something was wrong, of course, but I deflected with work stress and headaches. How could I explain that his father had just nuked our relationship from orbit without revealing what I was planning? The hardest part was pretending everything was fine when Jake excitedly talked about his dad's birthday party. "Mom's going all out," he said Tuesday night, sprawled on our couch while I stared blankly at my laptop. "She ordered that fancy cake from the French bakery, hired caterers, the works. Dad's been in such a good mood lately, I think retirement is really agreeing with him." Of course Frank was in a good mood. He'd successfully purged the ungrateful daughter-in-law who dared to have opinions about her own life. I bet he felt like he'd really shown me who was boss. "That's nice," I managed, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Jake looked at me more closely. "Are you sure you're okay? You've been weird since Sunday." Sunday. The day the lawyer had called. The day my world had shifted off its axis. "I'm fine. Just tired." But I wasn't fine, and the evidence burning a hole in my phone proved it. Photos of bank statements showing regular transfers to an account under the name Patricia Reynolds. Property records for a condo in downtown Phoenix, a condo that definitely wasn't the family's primary residence. Credit card receipts for jewelry, expensive dinners, weekend getaways. All charged to accounts that Frank's wife Linda definitely didn't know about. Patricia Reynolds. 34 years old, works at the marketing firm that handled Frank's old company's advertising. I'd done my research. Frank had been funding her lifestyle for over 15 years, and based on the amounts, she wasn't just some casual fling. This was a full-blown second life. But it got worse. Much worse. The property records showed that Frank had used his business account to purchase Patricia's condo, money that should have been reported as income but mysteriously never appeared on any tax documents. Money that had been systematically moved through shell companies to hide the paper trail. My financial background made the fraud obvious once I knew what to look for. Frank Mitchell, pillar of the community and champion of traditional family values, was not only a cheater but a tax evader. The man who'd lectured me about women knowing their place had been lying to the IRS for over a decade. Wednesday evening brought a new complication I hadn't expected. Linda called. "Sarah, honey, could you come over tomorrow? I want to go through some old photos for Frank's party, and I could use an extra pair of hands." My heart clenched. Linda. Sweet, devoted Linda who had no idea her husband had been living a double life. She'd always treated me like the daughter she never had, and here I was, planning to detonate her marriage at her husband's birthday party. Of course, I heard myself saying, "I'll be there around 2. After I hung up, I stared at my reflection in our hallway mirror. Was I really going to destroy this woman's life just to get revenge on Frank? Linda was innocent in all this. She'd loved her husband faithfully for 45 years, never knowing he'd been betraying her for a third of their marriage. But then I remembered Frank's words, "A real woman knows her place in the family." Linda deserved to know the truth about the man she'd wasted her life on. And Frank deserved to face the consequences of his choices. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the photos one more time. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Thursday afternoon at Linda's house was torture. She bustled around her immaculate living room, pulling out photo albums and reminiscing about their life together while I sat there with a fake smile plastered on my face, knowing exactly what kind of man her husband really was. "Oh, look at this one." Linda held up a picture from their 25th anniversary cruise. Frank surprised me with this trip. Said I deserved something special for putting up with him all those years. She laughed, that warm, genuine laugh that made my chest tight with guilt. Little did I know the real test was still coming with his cancer diagnosis. I nodded and made appropriate noises while internally screaming. Frank had surprised her with a cruise using money he'd probably skimmed from his business accounts. Money that should have gone to taxes. Money that was funding his mistress's lifestyle. You know, Sarah, Linda continued, carefully placing photos in a scrapbook, I'm so grateful Frank has you and Jake. Especially you. You brought such stability to this family. The irony was suffocating. Stability. While her husband was systematically betraying everything she believed their marriage stood for. Linda, can I ask you something? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Of course, honey. Have you ever? I mean, in all your years together, have you ever suspected Frank of? I trailed off, chickening out at the last second. Of what? She looked genuinely confused. Nothing. Never mind. Just wondering how you've made it work for so long. She smiled that trusting smile that made me want to throw up. Communication, dear. We tell each other everything. Always have. Everything. Right. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Dad wants to give a speech at the party. Says he has some important announcements to make about the family's future. I stared at the message, my blood running cold. Important announcements about the family's future. Was he planning to publicly justify cutting me out of the will? Was this going to be some kind of twisted victory lap where he explained his traditional values bullshit to the entire extended family? Everything okay? Linda asked, noticing my expression. Yeah, just Jake telling me about Frank's speech plans. Oh, he's been working on that all week. So secretive about it. You know how he loves a dramatic moment. Dramatic moment. This was getting worse by the minute. I helped Linda finish the photo arrangements, my mind racing. If Frank was planning to humiliate me publicly at his own party, then my original plan wasn't enough. I needed to be strategic about this. I needed to make sure the truth came out in a way that couldn't be dismissed or covered up. That evening, I made a decision that terrified me. I called Patricia Reynolds. It took 3 attempts to work up the courage to actually let the call go through. When a woman's voice answered, young, cheerful, completely unsuspecting, I almost hung up. Hi, is this Patricia? Yes, who's this? My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm Frank Mitchell's daughter-in-law. The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was completely different. Guarded. Scared. What do you want? I want to talk. About Frank. About what's been going on for the past 15 years. I don't know what you're talking about. Patricia, I'm not calling to threaten you or cause trouble. But Frank's having a big birthday party this Saturday, and I think there are some things his family deserves to know. Things about where their money has been going. Another long pause. Then, how much do you know? Enough. The question is, how much are you willing to lose when this all comes out? Because it's going to come out, Patricia. The only question is whether you have any control over how. The coffee shop where I met Patricia Reynolds felt like neutral territory, but nothing about this situation was neutral. She looked exactly like what I'd expected from her social media photos, young, polished, the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. What I hadn't expected was how terrified she looked. I never meant for it to go on this long, she said before I'd even sat down, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was a lifeline. It was supposed to be temporary. Just until I got back on my feet after my divorce. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but all I saw was genuine fear. It was almost disappointing. I'd wanted to hate her, to make this easier. 15 years is a long time to be getting back on your feet, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. She flinched. I know how it looks. But Frank, he made it seem like it wasn't hurting anyone. Said his wife didn't care about money, that she was happier not knowing about his business dealings. He made it sound like I was helping him, not destroying his marriage. And you believe that? I was 23 when we met. Her voice cracked slightly. My ex-husband had left me with nothing but debt, and Frank was this successful, charming older man who wanted to take care of me. I was stupid and desperate, and by the time I realized what I'd gotten myself into. You were in too deep, I finished. She nodded miserably. The condo, my car, my job at the marketing firm, it's all connected to him. If this comes out, I lose everything. But more than that. She took a shaky breath. I have a daughter now. She's 8. She doesn't know about Frank, thinks I'm just really good at my job. How do I explain to her that mommy's been living a lie? A daughter. Of course there was a daughter. This was getting more complicated by the minute. Does Frank know about her? God, no. I made sure of that. The last thing I wanted was for him to think he had some claim over my real life. I felt a grudging respect for that decision, even as my mind raced with implications. Patricia, I need you to understand something. Frank just cut me out of his will because I wouldn't quit my job to be a perfect housewife. After 6 years of being his caretaker, of treating him like a father I never had, he decided I wasn't family enough to deserve his respect or his inheritance. Her face went white. Oh my God. Sarah, I am so sorry. I had no idea he was. There's more. He's planning to make some kind of speech at his birthday party tomorrow. Some announcement about the family's future. I think he's going to publicly justify what he did to me. That sounds like him, she said quietly. Frank likes his grand gestures. He's always been dramatic about proving his point. Here's what I'm thinking, I said, leaning forward. You help me make sure the truth comes out tomorrow night, and I'll help you figure out how to land on your feet when this is over. You've got evidence of the financial arrangements, right? Bank records, documentation? She nodded slowly. Everything. I kept copies of everything because I was always afraid this day would come. Good. Because when the IRS gets involved, and they will, you're going to need to prove you were a victim, not a co-conspirator. The IRS? She looked like she might throw up. Patricia, Frank has been committing tax fraud for years. The money he's been giving you, the property purchases, all of it should have been reported as income. When this comes out, they're going to come after everyone involved. She buried her face in her hands. My daughter. What's going to happen to my daughter? That depends on how cooperative you are when the investigation starts. And whether you help me make sure Frank can't spin this story to protect himself. When she looked up, there was something new in her eyes. Something that looked like resolve. What do you need me to do? Friday night was sleepless. I lay in bed next to Jake, listening to his peaceful breathing while my mind raced through every possible scenario for tomorrow's disaster. Patricia had agreed to show up at the party, not as a guest, but as backup. She'd park across the street and wait for my signal. If Frank tried to twist the narrative or play victim, she'd walk in with her own evidence. But lying there in the dark, the full weight of what I was about to do crashed over me like a tsunami. By tomorrow night, Frank's marriage would be over. Linda would be devastated. The entire Mitchell family would be in chaos. And Jake. God, Jake. My husband had no idea his father was capable of this level of betrayal. He'd grown up seeing Frank as flawed but fundamentally decent, a gruff traditionalist, sure, but not a criminal. Not a man who'd been systematically lying to his family for 15 years. What if Jake couldn't forgive me for destroying his father? What if he chose Frank's side, decided I was the vindictive outsider who'd blown up his family for revenge? I could lose everything, not just Frank's inheritance, but my marriage, my place in the only family I'd ever really had. My phone buzzed softly. A text from Patricia, can't sleep. Keep thinking about my daughter. Are you sure this is the right thing? I stared at the message in the darkness. Was I sure? 24 hours ago, the answer would have been an absolute yes. But now, knowing about Patricia's 8-year-old daughter, knowing how many innocent people were going to get hurt. It's the right thing, I typed back. Frank made his choices. We're just making sure there are consequences. But even as I sent it, doubt gnawed at my stomach like acid. Saturday morning brought an unexpected complication. Linda called at 8 a.m., crying. Sarah, honey, I need your help. Something's wrong with Frank. My heart stopped. What do you mean wrong? He's been acting so strange since yesterday. Pacing around, making phone calls, checking his email constantly. And this morning I caught him in his office shredding papers. When I asked what they were, he snapped at me. Really snapped, not just his usual grumpiness. I closed my eyes, pieces falling into place. Maybe he's just nervous about the party? No, this is different. He seems scared. Frank's never scared of anything. I'm worried he's having some kind of breakdown from the stress of retirement. Scared. Frank was scared. Had he somehow figured out what I knew? Had Patricia tried to contact him? I'll be right over, I said. Oh, would you? Jake's already left for his golf game, and I don't want to bother him with this. You're so good at calming Frank down. The irony was suffocating, but I grabbed my keys anyway. 20 minutes later, I was standing in Linda's pristine kitchen while she wrung her hands and explained Frank's bizarre behavior. He's locked himself in his office, she whispered, as if he might hear us. Says he has important business to handle before tonight. But Sarah, he's retired. What business could be so urgent? Through the kitchen window, I could see Frank's office window on the second floor. The shades were drawn, but occasionally a shadow passed by. He was definitely agitated about something. Linda, has he gotten any unusual phone calls lately? Anyone you didn't recognize? She paused, thinking. Actually, yes. Yesterday afternoon, someone called asking for him specifically. When I said he wasn't available, they hung up without leaving a message. And there was a woman who called Thursday night, but she hung up as soon as I answered. Patricia. It had to be. Maybe she'd lost her nerve and tried to warn him. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Plans have changed. We need to talk before tonight. Meet me at the office, Patricia. I stared at the message, my blood running cold. If Patricia was backing out now, everything would fall apart. Frank would get away with it all, and I'd be left looking like the crazy daughter-in-law who'd made wild accusations without proof. Linda, I have to run an errand before tonight. Will you be okay here? She nodded, still looking worried. Just, if you see Jake, tell him his father's been acting strange. I don't want to ruin the party, but something's definitely not right. As I drove toward Patricia's office, one terrible thought kept circling through my mind. What if Frank had gotten to her first? The marketing firm's parking lot was nearly empty on Saturday afternoon, which made Patricia's sedan easy to spot. I found her in her office on the third floor, frantically shoving documents into a briefcase with shaking hands. Thank God you're here, she said without looking up. We have a problem. A big one. My stomach dropped. Did Frank contact you? Worse. She finally met my eyes, and I could see the panic there. My ex-husband showed up at my apartment this morning. He knows about Frank. What? Apparently someone's been asking questions about me around town. My ex put two and two together about how I've been affording my lifestyle. She slammed the briefcase shut. He's threatening to take me to court for full custody of Emma unless I give him $50,000 by Monday. I sank into the chair across from her desk. You think Frank hired someone to investigate you? It's the only explanation that makes sense. My ex isn't smart enough to figure this out on his own, but if someone fed him information. She started pacing behind her desk. Frank must have suspected I might become a liability. The pieces were clicking together in my mind. Frank's strange behavior that Linda had described, the mysterious phone calls, his sudden urgency about important business, he was covering his tracks. The question was, how much did he know about what I was planning? Patricia, we need those documents now more than ever. If Frank is trying to silence you through your ex-husband, it means he's desperate. You don't understand, she said, stopping mid-pace. If this goes to court, if there's a custody battle, Emma will find out everything. She'll learn that her entire life has been built on lies. She already barely remembers her father, if she loses me too. She's not going to lose you. How can you promise that? You said yourself the IRS will get involved. What if I go to prison? What if? Stop. I stood up and grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. Frank has been playing these games for 15 years. He's used you, he's used me, he's used his whole family. The only way this ends is if we make sure he can't manipulate anyone else. She took a shaky breath. There's something else. When my ex was making his threats this morning, he mentioned that Frank might not be around much longer anyway. Said his source told him the old man was planning to tie up loose ends. A chill ran down my spine. What did he mean by that? I don't know, but Sarah, what if Frank is planning something bigger than just cutting you out of his will? What if tonight's announcement isn't about family values at all? Before I could respond, Patricia's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and went white. It's him, she whispered. It's Frank. We stared at each other for a frozen moment. If Frank was calling Patricia directly, it meant he was done pretending she didn't exist. It meant he was ready to make moves. Answer it, I said quietly. Put it on speaker. With trembling fingers, Patricia accepted the call. Patricia. Frank's voice filled the office, and hearing it made my skin crawl. I think it's time we had a conversation. Frank, Don't talk. Just listen. I know someone's been asking questions about our arrangement. I know there are people who might not understand the nature of our relationship. So I'm going to make this very simple for you. Patricia and I exchanged glances. This was it, Frank showing his true colors. You're going to come to my party tonight. You're going to bring whatever documentation you have of our financial arrangements. And you're going to publicly explain to my family that everything was your idea. That you manipulated a sick old man during his cancer treatment. Frank, that's not. Or, he continued, his voice turning deadly calm, your daughter Emma is going to have a very difficult conversation with child services about her mother's questionable income sources. The line went dead. Patricia was trembling now, tears streaming down her face. But all I felt was white-hot rage. Frank Mitchell had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Patricia collapsed into her chair like a marionette with cut strings. He threatened my daughter, she whispered, staring at her phone like it might bite her. He actually threatened Emma. I felt something cold and dangerous settle in my chest. Frank had just crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Threatening an 8-year-old girl to cover up his own crimes? The man who'd lectured me about family values was willing to destroy a child's life to save his reputation. He can't actually do anything to Emma, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Child services doesn't investigate people based on anonymous tips from. You don't know Frank like I do, Patricia interrupted. When he wants something handled, he finds a way. He has connections everywhere, the country club, his old business partners, people who owe him favors. If he decides I'm a threat. She was right, and we both knew it. Frank Mitchell was exactly the kind of man who could make a few phone calls and turn Patricia's life into a bureaucratic nightmare. Even if the investigations ultimately cleared her, the process alone could take months. Months during which Emma might be placed in temporary custody with her manipulative father. Okay, I said, my mind racing. New plan. If Frank wants to play hardball, we'll show him what that actually looks like. Sarah, I can't risk Emma. Listen to me. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. My best friend from college is a family attorney. She specializes in custody cases involving parental manipulation. If we get her involved now, before Frank can make his calls, we can protect Emma and expose what he's really doing. Patricia looked up hopefully. You think that would work? I think Frank is counting on you being too scared and isolated to fight back. But you're not isolated anymore. I hit dial on Rebecca's number. Becca? It's Sarah Mitchell. I need an emergency consultation about a custody case. No, not for me. For a friend who's being blackmailed. While I explained the situation to Rebecca, Patricia gathered the financial documents we'd need. Bank statements, property records, email communications, 15 years of evidence that Frank had been systematically defrauding the government while funding his secret life. Rebecca can meet us at her office in an hour, I told Patricia after hanging up. She'll file protective paperwork this afternoon to prevent any custody challenges until we can properly document the blackmail attempt. But what about tonight? Frank expects me to show up and take the blame for everything. I checked the time. 3 p.m. The party started at 7. We had 4 hours to completely flip the script on Frank Mitchell's master plan. Oh, you're definitely showing up tonight, I said. But not the way Frank expects. My phone rang, Jake calling. For a split second, I considered not answering. In a few hours, I was going to detonate his father's life, and here he was probably calling to ask if I could pick up ice for the party. Hey babe, I answered, trying to keep my voice normal. Sarah, where are you? Mom called and said Dad's acting really weird. She's freaking out about the party. I'm running errands. What kind of weird? Locked in his office, making mysterious phone calls, snapping at Mom when she asks questions. She thinks he's having some kind of breakdown. If only she knew. Maybe he's just nervous about his speech? That's what I figured, but... Jake paused. Sarah, this might sound crazy, but do you think Dad's hiding something? Like, something big? My heart stopped. What makes you say that? I went by the house to check on him, and when I knocked on his office door, he yelled at me to leave him alone. Dad's never done that. Ever. And Mom found a bunch of shredded papers in his trash can this morning. Jake was starting to put pieces together on his own. Part of me felt relief, maybe when the truth came out tonight, it wouldn't be as much of a shock. But another part of me felt sick knowing I was about to confirm his worst suspicions about his father. I'm sure it's nothing serious, I lied. Maybe just old business papers he doesn't need anymore. Yeah, maybe. But he didn't sound convinced. Listen, can you get to the house early? Like around 5? Mom could use the help, and honestly, I'm worried about Dad. Something's definitely not right. Of course. I'll be there. After I hung up, Patricia was staring at me with wide eyes. Jake knows something's wrong. Jake knows his father's acting strange. He has no idea what we're about to uncover. Sarah, are you absolutely sure about this? Because once we walk into that party tonight with everything we know, there's no going back. Frank's marriage is over, your relationship with Jake might not survive, and my daughter's life gets turned upside down. I thought about Jake's voice on the phone, concerned, confused, but still trusting that his family was fundamentally solid. I thought about Linda, probably right now setting up decorations for a party that was about to become the worst night of her life. I thought about Emma, Patricia's 8-year-old daughter, who was going to learn that sometimes the adults who are supposed to protect you fail spectacularly. Then I thought about Frank's voice on that phone call. Cold, calculated, threatening a child to cover up his own crimes. Patricia, I said quietly, what do you think happens if we back down? Frank gets away with 15 years of fraud, he successfully destroys my reputation with his family, and he knows he can threaten your daughter anytime you become inconvenient. Is that the world you want Emma to grow up in? She took a shaky breath and nodded. You're right. Let's go see your lawyer friend. As we walked toward the parking garage, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Frank finally came out of his office. He seems calmer now, almost happy? Like he solved whatever was bothering him. See you at 5. Frank thought he'd won. He thought Patricia would cave to his threats, that I'd back down rather than risk my marriage, that he could control everyone through fear and manipulation. He was about to learn otherwise. Rebecca's law office felt like a war room by 5:30 p.m. Documents were spread across her conference table, and Patricia sat rigid in her chair while Rebecca reviewed the evidence with the focused intensity of a surgeon. This is absolutely blackmail, Rebecca said finally, tapping the recording Patricia had made of Frank's threatening phone call. And the financial fraud is extensive enough that the FBI's white-collar crime unit will definitely want to investigate. FBI? Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. Patricia, this isn't just tax evasion. This is systematic money laundering through shell companies, unreported income streams, and now criminal intimidation involving a minor. Frank Mitchell isn't just a cheating husband, he's looking at federal charges. I felt a moment of vertigo. When I'd started down this path, I'd been thinking about revenge and family drama. I hadn't fully grasped that I was about to expose an actual criminal. The protective order for Emma is already filed, Rebecca continued. If anyone from Child Services contacts you, they'll see immediately that you're the victim of an extortion attempt, not a negligent parent. But Sarah. She turned to me with serious eyes. You need to understand what you're walking into tonight. What do you mean? Once this goes public, Frank is going to realize he's facing serious prison time. People do desperate things when they're cornered. Are you prepared for him to potentially turn violent? The thought hadn't occurred to me. Frank was 70 years old, a cancer survivor who'd seemed frail during his treatment. But Rebecca was right, desperate people were unpredictable people. The party will be full of witnesses, I said. Surely he wouldn't. Sarah, you're about to destroy this man's entire life in front of everyone he cares about. His marriage, his reputation, his freedom, it's all going to evaporate in the span of one evening. That kind of public humiliation can trigger extreme responses. Patricia looked like she might throw up. Maybe we should just turn everything over to the authorities and let them handle it quietly. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Frank is giving a speech tonight about the family's future. He's planning to publicly justify cutting me out of his will, probably with some lecture about traditional values and knowing my place. If we let him control the narrative, he'll find a way to spin himself as the victim. Rebecca nodded slowly. Sarah's right. Men like Frank are master manipulators. If he gets ahead of this story, he'll claim the affair was Patricia's fault, the financial irregularities were simple mistakes, and any evidence against him was fabricated by vindictive women. But if the truth comes out at his own birthday party, in front of his whole family, he can't dismiss it or explain it away, I finished. My phone rang, Jake again. I really have to go, I said, standing. The party starts in an hour, and I promised I'd help Linda set up. Sarah, wait. Rebecca grabbed my arm. I'm serious about being careful tonight. I want you to text me every 30 minutes so I know you're safe. And if Frank reacts badly, if he threatens you or becomes aggressive, you call 911 immediately. I will. And Patricia, you stay in your car until Sarah signals you. Don't go into that house unless there are plenty of witnesses around. As I drove toward the Mitchell house, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Rebecca's warnings had made this feel real in a way that planning and document gathering hadn't. In less than 2 hours, I was going to walk into a birthday party and systematically destroy the guest of honor's entire existence. But when I pulled into the driveway and saw Linda through the window, carefully arranging flowers on the dining room table with that same trusting smile she'd had yesterday, I knew there was no turning back. Frank Mitchell had made his choices. Now it was time for consequences. The Mitchell house was picture-perfect chaos when I arrived. Linda had outdone herself, elegant floral arrangements on every surface, string lights draped artfully around the living room, and the dining table set with her finest china. Family members were already arriving, and the sound of laughter and conversation drifted through the rooms like everything was completely normal. Sarah. Thank goodness you're here. Linda rushed over, looking frazzled but excited. Could you help me with the appetizers? And have you seen Frank? He disappeared again about 20 minutes ago. I forced a smile while my stomach churned. I'll check on him after I help with the food. But as I arranged cheese and crackers on serving platters, my hands kept shaking. Every time someone mentioned how wonderful Frank looked, how proud they were of him, how much the family meant to him, I felt like screaming. These people had no idea they were celebrating a fraud. Jake appeared at my elbow, looking stressed. Dad's locked himself in his office again. Won't answer when I knock. This isn't like him, Sarah. Even on his worst days, he's never missed greeting people at his own party. Through the kitchen window, I could see Frank's office light was on, but the curtains were drawn tight. What was he doing up there? Destroying more evidence? Making more threatening phone calls? Maybe he's just practicing his speech, I suggested weakly. For 2 hours? Jake shook his head. Mom's starting to panic. She keeps asking people to wait a little longer for him to come down, but... My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, something's wrong. There's a man in a suit taking pictures of my car and license plate. I think Frank hired someone to watch me. My blood ran cold. Frank wasn't just covering his tracks, he was actively investigating Patricia. Which meant he might know about our meeting with Rebecca. He might know exactly what we were planning. Jake, I need to make a quick phone call, I said, stepping toward the back porch. But before I could reach the door, Linda's voice cut through the party chatter. Everyone. Frank's coming down. I turned to see Frank descending the staircase like a king approaching his throne. He'd changed into his best suit, his silver hair was perfectly styled, and he wore the confident smile of a man who believed he'd already won. When his eyes found mine across the crowded room, that smile widened. Sorry to keep everyone waiting, Frank announced, his voice carrying easily over the conversation. I was handling some important business. But now. He paused dramatically, surveying his assembled family and friends. Now I'm ready to celebrate properly. Linda beamed and rushed to his side. You look wonderful, darling. I was starting to worry. No need to worry about anything anymore, Frank said, kissing her cheek while never breaking eye contact with me. I've taken care of all our problems. The way he emphasized all our problems made my skin crawl. What had he done in that office? What kind of business had he been handling? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Patricia, the man is walking toward my car. I'm leaving. I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't risk Emma. No. This couldn't be happening. Not when we were so close. I typed back frantically, wait. Go to Rebecca's office. You'll be safe there. But I could see the 3 dots indicating she was typing a response, then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, I'm sorry. You're on your own. Frank was working the room now, accepting birthday wishes and compliments with the grace of a practiced politician. But I noticed he kept glancing toward the windows, and twice I caught him checking his phone with a satisfied expression. He'd scared Patricia off. Somehow, he'd figured out our plan and neutralized the threat she represented. Now it was just me, with a collection of financial documents and no backup. Sarah, honey, Linda appeared beside me with a concerned expression. You look pale. Are you feeling all right? Before I could answer, Frank's voice boomed across the room. If I could have everyone's attention, I'd like to say a few words before we eat. This was it. Frank was about to give his speech about family values and traditional roles, probably followed by some pointed comments about loyalty and knowing one's place. Without Patricia's testimony, I had no way to prove the affair or the financial fraud. It would be my word against his, and everyone in this room loved and respected Frank Mitchell. I was about to walk into a massacre, and I was completely alone. Frank positioned himself in the center of the living room, glass of champagne raised, looking every inch the beloved patriarch surrounded by his adoring family. The sight made me sick. 70 years, he began, his voice warm with practiced charm. 70 years of learning what really matters in this world. Family. Loyalty. Understanding your place and your responsibilities. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Linda gazed at him with pure devotion, and Jake nodded along with several cousins. They had no idea they were about to witness a masterclass in manipulation. My phone vibrated against my leg. A text from an unknown number, don't do anything stupid tonight. Some secrets are worth keeping buried. A friend. Frank's friend. The same person who'd been watching Patricia, who'd scared her into running. My hand started trembling as the implication hit me. Frank wasn't just threatening Patricia anymore, he was threatening me directly. I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, Frank continued, his eyes finding mine across the room. About what we leave behind, and who deserves to inherit the fruits of our labor. Here it comes. The public justification for cutting me out of his will. Some people come into our families and think they can change our values, our traditions. They think their modern ideas are more important than the wisdom of generations. Several relatives glanced in my direction, confused. Jake's brow furrowed as he looked between his father and me. But I've learned something important, Frank said, his smile turning predatory. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who betray us. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions to protect what really matters. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number, check your email. Now. With shaking fingers, I pulled up my email app. The newest message made my blood freeze. Photos attached. Wouldn't want Jake to see these before you make the right choice. Delete everything you think you know and leave quietly, or your marriage ends tonight too. A friend. I opened the first attachment and nearly dropped my phone. It was a photo of me meeting with Patricia yesterday, taken through the coffee shop window. The second showed me entering Rebecca's law office. The third was a screenshot of my bank account, with several large withdrawals highlighted, money I'd used to cover Frank's medical expenses during his cancer treatment. But the final attachment was the most damaging, a doctored bank statement showing those same withdrawals going into an account under my name, with a balance of over $200,000. To anyone who didn't know the context, it would look like I'd been embezzling from Frank for years. Sarah? Jake was suddenly beside me, looking concerned. You look like you're about to pass out. Frank's voice continued in the background, which brings me to some changes I need to announce regarding our family's financial future. I stared at my phone screen, my mind racing. Frank had been busy in his office, all right. He'd created evidence that would destroy my reputation and my marriage. If I tried to expose him now, he'd claim I was a desperate embezzler trying to deflect blame onto him. Those photos of me meeting with Patricia and Rebecca would look like proof I'd been planning this character assassination for days. Before I continue, Frank said, his voice cutting through my panic, I want to make sure everyone's here. Sarah, dear, could you come stand beside Linda and Jake? You're such an important part of this family. Every eye in the room turned to me. Frank's expression was pleasant, grandfatherly, completely innocent. But I could see the trap he was laying. Get me positioned where everyone could see me, then deliver his bombshell about my supposed betrayal. Jake gently took my arm. Come on, he wants you up front. As I walked toward Frank on unsteady legs, my phone vibrated one more time. One final text, smile, Sarah. You wouldn't want to cause a scene at such a lovely family gathering. I looked up to meet Frank's eyes, and he winked at me. He'd won, and he knew it. I stood frozen in the center of the room, surrounded by Frank's family, with his threats burning in my pocket and his triumphant smile boring into me. Every face around me was expectant, waiting for whatever announcement Frank had planned. Linda squeezed my hand affectionately, completely oblivious to the psychological warfare happening right in front of her. As I was saying, Frank continued, his voice dripping with false warmth, family loyalty means everything to me. Which is why it breaks my heart when someone we've trusted proves they don't share our values. My phone buzzed again. Another text, one word from you and those photos go to Jake's phone. Choose wisely. But then something unexpected happened. The front door burst open, and Patricia Reynolds walked in. Not the terrified, broken woman who'd been texting me about running away. This Patricia stood tall, her chin raised, carrying a manila envelope like a weapon. Behind her walked a woman I didn't recognize, professional looking, with the bearing of someone used to being in charge. Frank's confident expression flickered for just a moment. I'm sorry, but this is a private family gathering. Frank Mitchell, the woman interrupted, pulling out a badge. I'm Agent Sarah Chin, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to talk. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Linda's grip on my hand tightened convulsively. Jake stepped closer to his father, protective instincts kicking in despite his confusion. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding, Frank said, but his voice had lost its commanding tone. This is hardly the time or place. Actually, it's exactly the right time, Patricia said, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room. Because I'm tired of being threatened into silence about what you've been doing for 15 years. Frank's face went ashen. I don't know what this woman is talking about. I've never seen her before in my life. Really? Agent Chin opened her own folder. Because we have bank records showing regular transfers from your business accounts to Ms. Reynolds totaling over $800,000. We have property records for a condominium purchased in her name with your money. And as of this afternoon, we have a recording of you threatening her 8-year-old daughter. The silence in the room was deafening. Linda swayed slightly beside me, and Jake caught her arm. Dad, Jake's voice was barely a whisper. What is she talking about? But Frank had recovered his composure with frightening speed. The mask of confusion fell away, replaced by cold calculation. This is clearly an orchestrated attack. My daughter-in-law Sarah has been stealing from our family accounts for years. When I discovered her embezzlement and removed her from my will, she recruited this woman to make false accusations against me. He pulled out his phone with theatrical precision. I have evidence of Sarah's theft, documentation of her meetings with this woman, proof that they've been planning this character assassination together. Agent Chen looked at me with newfound interest. Mrs. Mitchell, is this true? My mouth went dry. This was exactly what Frank had planned, turn the tables, make me look like the criminal, use Patricia's presence as proof of some elaborate conspiracy. Sarah would never, Jake started to say, but Frank interrupted. Show them your bank balance, Sarah. Tell everyone about the $200,000 you've hidden away. The room was staring at me now with a mixture of shock and suspicion. Even Linda was looking at me with hurt confusion, like she was seeing me for the first time. My phone was still clutched in my sweaty palm, Frank's fabricated evidence just a few taps away from destroying everything. But as I looked around the room at these people I'd considered family, one realization hit me like lightning. I was done being afraid of Frank Mitchell. I took a deep breath and looked directly at Agent Chin. Yes, I have $200,000 in my account. Money I spent on Frank's medical bills during his cancer treatment because his insurance wouldn't cover experimental treatments. Money I loaned to this family when they needed it most. Frank's confident expression wavered slightly, but he pressed on. That's a convenient story, but... Agent Chen, I interrupted, pulling out my own phone. I assume you'll want to see the real bank records? The ones showing transfers to Frank's medical providers, not from his accounts to mine? Patricia stepped forward, her envelope still clutched in her hands. And I have 15 years of documentation showing that every penny Frank gave me came with explicit instructions to keep quiet about our relationship. Including emails where he detailed how to hide the money from his wife and the IRS. This is ridiculous, Frank snapped, but sweat was beading on his forehead now. Linda, surely you don't believe these. Frank. Linda's voice was barely audible, but it cut through his bluster like a blade. Is it true? Have you been with this woman? The silence stretched impossibly long. Frank's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies, for escape routes, for anything that might save him. Finally, his gaze landed back on Linda's devastated face. Linda, I can explain. Oh my god. The words escaped her like air from a punctured balloon. Oh my god, it's true. Jake was staring at his father like he'd never seen him before. Dad, what the hell is going on? Who is this woman? What money are they talking about? But before Frank could answer, Agent Chen's phone rang. She answered it curtly, listened for a moment, then looked up with grim satisfaction. Mr. Mitchell, that was our forensic accounting team. They finished their preliminary review of your business records. You're under arrest for tax evasion, money laundering, and criminal intimidation. The room exploded into chaos. Several relatives started talking at once, Linda began crying, and Jake looked like he might be sick. But through it all, Frank's voice rose above the din with one last desperate gambit. Sarah orchestrated this entire thing, he shouted as Agent Chin approached with handcuffs. She's been planning this revenge for weeks. Check her phone, she's been coordinating with this Reynolds woman to destroy our family. And that's when I realized Frank had made a critical error. He was so focused on painting me as the villain that he'd just admitted Patricia Reynolds existed, contradicting his earlier claim that he'd never seen her before. Agent Chin paused, clearly noting the inconsistency. So you do know Ms. Reynolds? Frank's face went white as he realized his mistake. That's not what I. Because 30 seconds ago you claimed you'd never seen her in your life, Agent Chin continued. Now you're saying she's been working with your daughter-in-law for weeks. Which is it, Mr. Mitchell? The trap had finally snapped shut, and Frank knew it. His shoulders sagged as the fight went out of him. I want to speak to my lawyer. But the damage was done. As Agent Chin read him his rights, I looked around the room at the faces of Frank's family and friends. Shock, disgust, disappointment, but when I met Jake's eyes, I saw something unexpected. Relief. Sarah, he said quietly, moving to my side as his father was led away in handcuffs. I am so sorry. I should have known he was capable of something like this. Linda was sobbing now, supported by her sister. 45 years of marriage, destroyed in the span of 10 minutes. But Patricia caught my eye and nodded slightly. We'd done it. Frank Mitchell's reign of manipulation was finally over. The only question now was what would be left of this family when the dust settled. The aftermath of Frank's arrest felt surreal. One moment we were at a birthday party, the next moment police cars were parked outside and neighbors were peeking through their curtains at the spectacle unfolding on Maple Street. Agent Chen had taken Patricia and me aside for preliminary statements while the family members who remained tried to process what they'd just witnessed. Most of the party guests had quietly slipped away once the handcuffs came out, leaving behind their untouched plates and half-empty wine glasses like evidence of a celebration that had never really happened. Mrs. Mitchell, Agent Chen said, reviewing her notes, we'll need you to come in for a formal interview tomorrow. Your financial records will be crucial to establishing the timeline of Mr. Mitchell's fraud. I nodded, still feeling like I was watching this happen to someone else. What happens now? To the will, I mean? If the assets were obtained through illegal means, the will could be invalidated pending investigation. But that's a matter for probate court. She glanced toward the house where Jake was trying to console his mother. Your family has a long road ahead of him. Your family, the words hit me strangely. After everything that had happened, were they still my family? Patricia approached us hesitantly, looking drained. Agent Chen, what about my daughter? Frank threatened her, and I'm worried about what he might do even from jail. Mr. Mitchell is being held without bail pending arraignment. He won't be making any phone calls tonight except to his attorney. But we'll recommend a restraining order to ensure your daughter's safety. As Patricia walked back to her car, she paused beside me. Sarah, I know this isn't how either of us wanted this to end. Is it ended though? I asked quietly. Frank's been manipulating people for decades. You think he doesn't have one more play left? Her expression darkened. What do you mean? Before I could answer, Jake appeared at my shoulder, looking haggard. Sarah, we need to talk. About everything. My stomach clenched. Here it was, the moment I'd been dreading. Jake was about to blame me for destroying his father, for humiliating his family, for bringing federal agents to their door. Jake, I know you're angry, but... Angry? He looked genuinely confused. Sarah, you saved us. From him. From whatever else he was planning. I stared at him. You're not upset that I exposed your father? I'm upset that it took this long for someone to stop him. Jake ran his hands through his hair. God, Sarah, the things he said to you about knowing your place, cutting you out of the will, I should have seen the signs. I should have protected you. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by a new worry. Through the living room window, I could see Linda sitting alone on the couch, staring at nothing. She looked completely broken. What about your mom? I asked. Jake's expression tightened. She's not handling this well. She keeps asking if she could have prevented it somehow, if she missed signs of the affair. And the money. He shook his head. She had no idea about any of it. 45 years of marriage, and it turns out she never really knew her husband at all. A new thought struck me, cold and unwelcome. Jake, what if this isn't over? What if Frank has more secrets we haven't found yet? What do you mean? Before I could explain, my phone rang. Unknown number again. My blood ran cold as I remembered the threatening texts from earlier. Don't answer it, Jake said, noticing my expression. But I was already swiping to accept the call. Hello? Sarah Mitchell? The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? This is David Brennan, Frank Mitchell's attorney. We need to discuss the terms of your silence regarding tonight's unfortunate misunderstanding. I felt Jake tense beside me. Excuse me? Mr. Mitchell has authorized me to offer you a substantial settlement in exchange for retracting your statements to federal investigators. Shall we say $500,000? The audacity was breathtaking. Frank was sitting in jail, caught red-handed with evidence of multiple felonies, and he was still trying to buy his way out. Mr. Brennan, you can tell Frank that. Think carefully, Mrs. Mitchell. Federal investigations can be extensive. They tend to examine everyone's financial history very thoroughly. I'd hate for your own tax situation to come under scrutiny. The threat was crystal clear. Frank might be in custody, but he could still cause problems for me if I didn't play along. Jake grabbed the phone from my hand. This is Jake Mitchell, Frank's son. If you contact my wife again with threats or bribery attempts, I'll report you to the State Bar Association myself. He hung up and immediately called Agent Chen. But as I watched him explaining the situation to the FBI agent, one terrifying thought kept circling through my mind. If Frank was this desperate to buy my silence, what other secrets was he still hiding? The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at cold coffee and trying to process the previous night's events, when Agent Chen's number appeared on my screen. Mrs. Mitchell, we have a problem, she said without preamble. Frank's attorney filed an emergency motion claiming his client was entrapped by you and Patricia Reynolds. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means he's arguing that the FBI raid was based on fabricated evidence planted by vengeful family members. He's claiming prosecutorial misconduct and demanding all charges be dropped. I sank back in my chair. Even from jail, Frank was still manipulating the system. Can he actually do that? His lawyer is very good, and very expensive. The kind of attorney you hire when you're planning to fight dirty. Agent Chen paused. There's something else. We found evidence that Frank has been moving money offshore for months. Large amounts. Far more than what he gave to Patricia. How much money are we talking about? Conservatively? Around $3 million. Hidden in accounts across 4 different countries. $3 million. No wonder Frank was desperate enough to offer me $500,000 to keep quiet. He had money stashed everywhere, money that Linda didn't know about, money that should have been part of the family inheritance. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you or Patricia Reynolds have any contact with Frank's offshore accounts? No, of course not. I only helped him with his domestic medical expenses during his cancer treatment. Good. Because Frank's attorney is claiming you discovered those accounts while managing his finances and that this whole revenge plot was actually an elaborate cover for your own embezzlement scheme. I felt like I was drowning. Every move I'd made to expose Frank was being twisted into evidence against me. Agent Chen, you saw the documentation. You have Patricia's testimony about the threats. I believe you, Mrs. Mitchell. But Frank's lawyer is painting a very different picture. He's claiming Patricia Reynolds is your accomplice, that you recruited her to pose as Frank's mistress, and that the threatening phone call was staged. That's insane. How could we fake 15 years of financial records? According to his motion, you had access to Frank's business accounts and could have created false documentation over time. He's arguing that your position as his medical advocate gave you unprecedented access to his financial information. My phone started buzzing with another call. Jake. I let it go to voicemail, but Agent Chen noticed my distraction. There's one more thing, she said grimly. Frank's lawyer contacted the state attorney general's office this morning. He's demanding that you be investigated for elder abuse, claiming you manipulated a sick old man for financial gain. Elder abuse. The charge that could destroy not only my freedom but my career as a financial advisor. Even if the accusations were eventually proven false, the investigation alone would ruin my professional reputation. What do I do? I whispered. Get your own lawyer. A good one. And Mrs. Mitchell? Don't trust anyone from Frank's inner circle until this is resolved. If he has $3 million hidden offshore, he has the resources to buy a lot of loyalty. After she hung up, I listened to Jake's voicemail. Sarah, call me back immediately. Mom's been getting phone calls all morning from reporters. Someone leaked the story to the press, and it's not pretty. They're calling you a gold digger who seduced a cancer patient for his money. My hands started shaking as the full scope of Frank's counterattack became clear. He wasn't just fighting the charges, he was systematically destroying my reputation to discredit my testimony. And with $3 million at his disposal, he could afford to wage this war for a very long time. I was about to discover that exposing Frank Mitchell's secrets was only the beginning of this nightmare. The breaking point came 3 days later when I found Jake packing a suitcase in our bedroom. Where are you going? I asked, though my heart already knew the answer. He couldn't meet my eyes. My mom needs me right now. The reporters won't leave her alone, the FBI keeps calling with more questions, and her lawyer says Frank's assets might all be frozen pending investigation. Jake, look at me. When he finally did, I saw something I'd never seen before in his face, doubt. You think I did this for money, don't you? I don't know what to think anymore, Sarah. His voice cracked. The evidence Frank's lawyer presented, it looks really bad. $3 million missing, and you're the only one who had access to his accounts. I felt my world tilting off its axis. You've known me for 8 years. Do you honestly believe I'm capable of elder abuse and embezzlement? I want to believe you, but... He gestured helplessly at his suitcase. My father is in federal prison, my mother might lose her house, and everyone's saying my wife orchestrated the whole thing. Everyone meaning Frank's expensive lawyer. Sarah, please. I just need some time to think. After Jake left, I sat alone in our empty house and realized Frank had won after all. Not the legal battle, Agent Chen had assured me that the real evidence would eventually vindicate me. But he'd succeeded in destroying what mattered most, my marriage and my place in the family I'd fought so hard to protect. That's when Rebecca called with news that changed everything. Sarah, you need to get down here immediately, she said, her voice electric with excitement. Patricia found something that's going to blow this case wide open. I found Patricia in Rebecca's office, surrounded by boxes of documents and looking more alive than I'd seen her since this whole nightmare began. My daughter Emma is smarter than I gave her credit for, Patricia said without preamble. When I told her we might have to move because of adult problems, she got worried and confessed something. She's been recording Frank's phone calls for months. What? She got suspicious about all the business calls at my apartment and started using her tablet to record them. Frank never knew she was there. Patricia held up a small device. Sarah, we have him on tape ordering surveillance on you, instructing his lawyer to fabricate evidence, and discussing how to move the remaining offshore money before the FBI could freeze it. Rebecca was practically glowing. This isn't just evidence of the original crimes anymore. This is witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Frank just turned a financial fraud case into a federal racketeering charge. There's more, Patricia continued. Emma recorded him talking to someone about handling the Sarah problem permanently if the legal pressure didn't work. My blood ran cold. Handling me how? We don't know yet, but Agent Chen is taking it as a credible threat. Frank's bail hearing is this afternoon, and with these recordings, he's not getting out. The bail hearing was a massacre. Frank's expensive lawyer looked increasingly desperate as Agent Chen presented the new evidence. The threats against me, the attempts to fabricate evidence, the ongoing conspiracy to hide assets, it painted a picture of a man who would stop at nothing to escape consequences. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, Mr. Mitchell has demonstrated a clear pattern of intimidation and obstruction. He poses a flight risk and a potential danger to witnesses. Frank's confident mask finally slipped completely as the judge denied bail. As they led him away, his eyes found mine across the courtroom. For the first time since I'd known him, Frank Mitchell looked like exactly what he was, a desperate old man who'd run out of moves. But the real victory came that evening when Jake appeared on my doorstep, looking exhausted but determined. I saw the news, he said quietly. The recordings, the threats. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should never have doubted you. You were protecting your mother. I was being a coward. He stepped closer. My father spent years manipulating all of us, making us doubt our own perceptions. But you were brave enough to stand up to him when the rest of us were too scared to see the truth. 6 months later, Frank pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have exposed even more of his crimes. The offshore accounts were recovered and distributed to his victims, including a substantial amount to Linda for the retirement she'd lost. Patricia used her portion to start fresh with Emma in a new city, far from the wreckage of Frank's manipulation. As for me, I kept exactly what I'd always wanted, my marriage, my integrity, and my place in a family that had finally learned the difference between loyalty and enabling. Frank Mitchell had taught me something valuable after all, that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be silent about the truth.